Welcome. I'm Costi Perikos. I run our global AI and data practice for Deloitte. And I'm joined here today by a colleague and very good friend, Yusuf Bakawi.
We do, Costi.
Who runs the global AI, who runs the AI and data practice in the Middle East. Now, some of you might be thinking, why in a segment related to the UK are we talking about the Middle East? Maybe I should just clarify that, Yusuf, up front. So, as many of you might know, the UK and the Middle East work very closely together. We do so as a firm. I do a lot of work in the Middle East. I do a lot of work with Yusuf in some great projects like NEOM and other places. And so we thought we would perhaps share some of our experience and talk about what we're doing and what we're seeing, because I think the Middle East really is it's becoming an epicenter for AI. So Yusuf, welcome to the not so sunny UK.
It's sunny enough for London. Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to see you. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what you're seeing in the market.
Well, first of all, I mean, we're very busy. I think that's something to keep in mind, because, and this is one of the reasons why we work so closely together, obviously, is because the Middle East is seeing a significant uptake in AI, data analytics, advanced analytics capabilities, and there's a lot of hunger in the market for global capabilities, for the best talent to come from all over the world in order to solve some of the Middle East unique problems to some extent, but also to bring in that kind of excellence in delivery and excellence in the advanced thought leadership that global capability global capabilities can bring in. So our team in the Middle East has been very, very busy. We're working on some very exciting projects, some very innovative solutions, whether it's in the data engineering side, trying to solve some of the complicated problems, right? But also a lot of interesting, AI advancements that we're seeing, right? So obviously the topic of generative AI is a big topic. I know you've been doing some research yourself, just over last night, wasn't it?
I may have used an LLM or two to research this. Yeah.
Because it is, I mean, AI is to a great extent, the way I see it is that it's a great equalizer for a region like the Middle East, because the ability to compete at scale, where the Middle East doesn't have the right scale, right? So we're not as big as Europe, we're not as big as the US or India, or so the larger territories. So our ability to penetrate has always been basically limited to our ability to scale out. But with topics like artificial intelligence and what we can do, the scale is no longer about how many people do you have. It's about how much can you innovate, how wild can you let your dreams take you. And so therefore the Middle East is actually truly at the epicenter of this innovation.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, one thing that really struck me, Yusuf, when I got to know the region better outside of just AI, is that if you look at some of the major challenges in the region, like healthcare, like education, like transport, even the fact that you've been educating me that when people say, in the region, many of the countries speak Arabic, that actually they speak 200 different. Describe it 200 different languages, right? But those are all use cases where I think AI is, those are really clear use cases for AI. When we look at what our clients are doing, be it in transport, in health, in things like translation, AI has a big role to play. So, I'm not surprised that, we can't always go into details of the projects that we're doing, that many of the things we're doing are in those cases, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot to be done, right? So there's a lot of, there are a lot of opportunities, because also we have our own challenges in the Middle East, right? So there are some cultural challenges, there are language challenges. There are some factors that we need to take into consideration when we're thinking about how do we apply AI, how do we get AI at scale, for example, how do we do it deploy AI in production? Can we trust it? All of these things. I mean, there's a lot of maturity. There's a maturity curve that we need to go through. But it is the most exciting thing is that how pervasive it is, like you just mentioned, right? So with the use cases we're seeing are across all industries. And some exciting things are also happening. So if you really think about it, I mean, in the UAE, for example, we have a national artificial intelligence strategy.
Saw that, right?
Which is amazing, because it means that there is a lot of backing behind the need for AI to become such a scale capabilities because it's such an equalizer, such an important element. The UAE, for example, has a target of AI contributing up to 20% of its non-oil GDP by 2030. Right, so these are significant targets that the Middle East is putting on itself, and the UAE is not the only country, obviously, right, that's doing this. But it means that we are taking it very seriously, and it is important. And as a geography, we're seeing that importance come in, like in every walk of life and everything that we do.
I think that's right. I think one observation in terms of challenges, and it's not unique to the Middle East, although I think culturally, because things are quite hierarchical, it's a bit more prominent. Is that people don't necessarily trust the data, and that the data isn't always particularly good. But that's not specific to the Middle East. I always sort of say, good data leads to artificial intelligence, bad data leads to artificial incompetence. And I think through some of the lessons that some of our clients in the Middle East have learned, which are similar to the lessons elsewhere, some of the POCs haven't scaled, and they haven't kind of delivered value, and therefore created some mistrust because the data has been bad. But one of the things that I think is interesting culturally is, I used to, in the early days of analytics, when you were presenting to clients and saying, you need to stop making decisions on experience and gut feel on data, I used to have a slide of a hippo. And I used to say, decisions in organizations are still made on hippos, just to provoke a reaction. And hippo stands for highest paid person's opinion. Yeah. Because, we've all been in these meetings where the data says one thing, the most senior, most expensive guy says another, and everybody goes, yeah, we'll trust him instead. So, have you come across that a lot in the Middle East still?
So I think there's the level of awareness about the potential is definitely there, right? And it is no longer such an obscure topic for people, right? I think there is what I do see a lot is the eagerness to learn about what is the true potential, and what is possible, what's not possible, what is feasible, and what is logical. And 2 years ago, AI was a magical thing that was going to happen, right? So that I will just tell the AI model to give me an answer, and it'll give me all the answers, right? Yeah. But that's no longer the case. I think today, the average decision maker, whether you're in public sector or in commercial businesses, the understanding of what is the ability, what's possible, and what is logical, that understanding is generally setting in, and it's no longer about hippo, right? I love that. But there is also, that kind of the general attitude that we can do more, right? So why not just throw money at the problem, or throw people at the problem, and it'll solve itself? That's still there, right? And we will, more and more awareness is needed. And you've been through some of these conversations with me and with the rest of the team, and we'll educate. It's not just about educating the market, but it's also about allowing the market to experience it, see it for themselves, go through the journey. And when they go through the journey, everybody starts to understand what is truly possible and what's not really possible. So what is logical to expect out of AI?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And with that education and with the investment that the Middle East is making, it's always difficult to make predictions in sessions like this. But if I look at sort of, what KAUST is doing in Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi's got an AI university, I can see kind of by 2030, and I think that's one of the UAE's kind of objectives, isn't it? They're not going to be importing knowledge. They're going to be exporting.
Definitely not. I think if you really think about it, some of the programs that are being initiated, that have been initiated already. So it's something like the Million Arab Coders program. It's been initiated by Future Foundation, for example. The whole objective of this is that by 2030, we have those million Arab coders who can write code and can use AI in the right way. I mean, these are not like that's the beauty of having that level of adoption at a national level, at a country level, or a region level, because it allows you to think big and start paving the way for it moving forward, right? So yeah, I think by 2030, we should definitely start seeing a lot more innovation coming out of the Middle East and a lot more, value creation rather than consumption.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And this is one of the things you and I spoke about quite a few times before. Like generally the Middle East is because we want to do things quick. We're not shy of spending money, generally speaking. Again, we're a consumer economy when it comes to value. So we wait for somebody to develop the latest, and we'll adopt that. I think AI is creating now this opportunity, and the whole point is creating these opportunities for us to net generate value at a global scale, at a global arena.
And it'll be interesting. I had a slightly controversial naughty thought when you were saying about the million coders, right? I was thinking they might only need 500,000 of them because the rest will be done by LLMs, right? And generative AI. I think, as you know, I've got 3 kids, and I wanted them all to be data scientists about 10 years ago. Data engineers about 3 years ago, and I think I'm going to suggest they all become prompt engineers. But what are you seeing kind of in the LLM generative AI space?
So, this is a hot topic, right? Obviously, everybody's talking about it. It's, I think there's something like 60 different, businesses that just sprung out in the last couple of weeks. This is a very interesting topic, but it is also not an easy topic for the Middle East because of some of the examples, like some of the things you've just mentioned, like there's so many dialects of Arabic that are out there. The lack of data and to a great extent, the lack of recorded data. Cloud adoption is very low in the Middle East, up until now, which is very strange, I know, but it's reality. So it is an uphill, there is a little bit of a curve that we need to go through, but we're still seeing some innovation. So MBZ UAI, so you mentioned the Mohammed bin Zayed University for Artificial Intelligence, for example, in collaboration with other organizations, they've just released a large language model that's based on Arabic content, right?
I read that.
It is amazing. There's a lot of investment, a lot of people who are dedicating a lot of their effort and energy to actually create something that is to be proud of out of the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is doing the same thing. Countries in Jordan, for example, like Jordan, for example, they're doing the same thing. There's a lot of investment in talent that is creating those kinds of basically capabilities for our region, and they become a lot more transferable as they mature and as they develop. And we'll solve these problems for sure, but it is a journey nonetheless.
Well, I think, again, thinking it's difficult to make predictions, right? But I see many countries like Saudi Arabia having these extensive programs around how you get, the youth into employment and into careers and things like that. And I think this challenge that generative AI is putting to us humans around what jobs will become automated, I think will disproportionately affect the youth.
For sure.
I'm sure it was the same with you. I spent my 3 or 4 years kind of gathering information together and putting it in reports that my seniors would look at and sort of correct and use their experience to kind of teach me. If you have a lot of that being done by LLMs, by large language models, it'd be interesting to see how the youth, what the start of a youth's career, be it in coding or something else, looks like.
I think I think this is a universal problem, first of all, right? So I don't think this is something that is specific to the Middle East, and the answer to it may not just be Middle East specific. However, there is also opportunities that exist in the Middle East because, again, now there is a new wave of educational curriculum. So there is now a lot of focus on it's not specifically AI related, but the whole point of what is to create new opportunities of learning, new methods of learning, and understanding, taking advantage of the fact that there is a little bit of an evolution of what the future is going to look like for the Middle East, for Arabs in general, right? So we're seeing schools and curriculums changing, and the more we're talking to, I was actually talking to somebody in the education sector just last week about how can we embed a part of the children's curriculum, how can we embed some of these thought processes about what the future generation's job profile is going to look like, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about, some of the stuff that's happening in universities today, like big research in AI space, in data science space. We're saying, let's start talking about these things with children who are in, mid school or high school, because they need to start, and their teachers or teaching them need to understand that, they're raising a newer generation. And there are opportunities. The Middle East is very ripe for these opportunities, just by the lack of the timing of all of this.
I completely agree. I mean, for me, you're right, these problems are universal. But my sense is in the Middle East, the governments are thinking about the youth perhaps more acutely than elsewhere, because they have all these opportunities, but also these challenges to look at. And I love the idea of going to speak to high schools around these things. I mean, as you know, we have a big Women in AI program. I've seen one of our pet hobby horses around getting more women into AI, and where we see the biggest impact is when you actually go to schools and you say to all these school kids, you can be a data scientist irrespective of kind of, what gender, ethnicity, et cetera, you are. And, just on that point, and particularly for our viewers out there, because I think there's quite a lot of preconceptions around the Middle East. I've been really impressed by how diverse actually some of our skill set cohort is like. I mean, I was in LEAP in Saudi Arabia in February, which was kind of, it's as for those of you who don't know, it's one of the biggest AI conferences in the Middle East. It's probably one of the biggest AI conferences in the world, probably, how many people attend it. And it was open to all. And I would say the proportion of women in that conference, in that big hall, was higher than I've seen sort of, in places like the UK.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. I think cultural diversity is a big thing, right, in the Middle East. So in my team in the Middle East, for example, we have 16 different nationalities working together hand in hand. And I think these are, and obviously, the gender contribution to the team is a significant thing. And when we start talking about AI and the kind of opportunities that we need to develop, the more culturally diverse you are, the better your results are. I mean, when we start talking about ethical aspects of AI, right? So you don't want any inherent bias and all of that stuff. How do you avoid all of that? By creating that kind of cultural diversity and even gender diversity in the teams that are building those kinds of capabilities. So yeah, I mean, this is for sure, I think this is a big advantage that we have, that kind of melting pot environment, which is the Middle East, where East meets West, really, especially now,
absolutely.
Right? It's actually a big opportunity for the Middle East to, capitalize on the fact that we are already culturally diverse. Right?
Yeah. I always remind myself of the culturally diverse point, because every time I'm in the Middle East, I think I've said this to you, I feel like I'm back at the international school that I grew up in. Sort of, it's so many different so many nationalities, so many different kind of points of view, which are always very interesting. And you talked about kind of diversity and removing bias from algorithms. What I find really interesting as well, and again, not just in the Middle East, but with the advent of generative AI, is this idea of bias, needing diverse data, understanding the ethics, understanding guardrails is at the forefront of the conversation. When we started off in AI, it took 2 or 3 years for our clients to start worrying about these things.
Correct. Yeah.
But this seems to be, and particularly in all the discussions we're having in the Middle East, kind of front and center.
Well, yeah, I think again, there's like it's in a way the kind of a topic that leads into like these
Yeah,
topics
yeah.
lead into each other, right? Um, we're today we're we're seeing clients looking at things like that. They're trying to solve problems that they never thought they could solve
Yeah.
before, right? But the data isn't, we never curated data. So a lot of our clients never curated data. They never protected their data generation process, their data protection process. And suddenly we're looking at, clients are coming and saying, well, what do I do with this, right? I think you and I were,
Yeah.
when we were in Qatar, right? So we
Yeah.
had a similar conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? They're saying, well, we don't have the data. So there are new ways now. So with topics like generative AI, we can actually do a lot more than we would have been able to do again a year ago, right? Because of the, the kind of technology capabilities that are there, but also the mindset of thinking about how do I solve that problem? Instead of going to data, can we use proxy data? Can we use some synthetic data, for example, and then apply the same technologies and techniques and tools in order for us to get better results and enhance as we go along. So we're no longer crippled by lack of data because of things like this.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's also, my observation from doing a lot of work in the UK in the public sector is you also don't have hundreds of years of legacy of data either that creates data debt that you need to deal with, right? So that creates a flexibility and opportunity, I think.
Yeah.
Once you get past the trust issues and past the kind of curation issues that you've spoken about, I think, the runway becomes very, very quick.
For sure. And we also, because generally speaking, the Middle East is, modern, right? So, and not a lot of history, therefore, not a lot of technical debt, right? So not a lot of legacy systems and technologies that are running. So our ability to leapfrog is actually really available, right? We just need to get over that little hurdle. And it's not really a big deal as long as we are able to have open and honest conversations with our clients and able to basically take our clients through the journey of how do we reach them. And this is where things like, that's a role that I see is extremely important for Deloitte and Deloitte AI Institute, for example, because it is about creating a shift in, like, influencing the shift in the mindset of our entire region, not just for a specific client or a specific scenario or a situation. It is about looking at a much wider agenda of what do we need to do in order to basically leverage and capitalize on what is happening, but at the same time, keep in aligned to the strategic direction and the strategic objectives of our governments and leadership, where we want to create that capability. We want to be able to generate value on a global scale. We want to compete, and as a region, we want to be on the global arena. We want to be the innovators and the value generators rather than the consumers. That's a big role for us in in Deloitte.
Yeah, and it's going to be a bit of a leading question. You mentioned the institute, so I'm going to use that as a segue for us to talk a little bit about that. As you know, I'm really excited that we're launching the institute in the Middle East for all the reasons that you state. I think there's almost a greater appreciation of it by some of our clients and government departments in the Middle East. Many of them have shown an interest in partnering and things like that. But did you want to maybe talk a little bit about it and tell us kind of what plans are?
Well, so we're working obviously with the global teams.
Yeah.
And I think we're very close to creating our own vision of what an AI institute, Deloitte AI Institute, can do for us and for our country, for our region, for our clients, for our communities even. Right? It is it's a big collective effort from a lot of people, yourself included, obviously, right? But a lot of people are huddling up and saying, well, what is the vision, right? What are we trying to achieve? As this is not, I don't, I think you and I agree on this always, right? That we are not here. This is not a marketing gimmick, right? So this is not just something, something that just generates, content ads.
It's not marketing wear.
It's not marketing wear. No, it's not marketing wear. It is about influencing our communities and creating opportunities for not just Deloitte, but for all, the community around us, our clients, and even the next generation of talent that we are trying to, develop and enhance their own understanding of what's coming. So the idea here is that, we do want to create that that shift in mindset of saying, you know what, we can actually innovate ourselves. We can create something that is unique to solve our unique problems, and we don't necessarily need to always depend on somebody else creating for us. So that's the vision that we're creating, and we're very close. Watch this space. I think this is coming soon.
Yeah, no, definitely watch this space.
Watch this space. It's going to be a very, very interesting thing.
I know what some of the guys are brewing kind of in the basement, so to speak. And I think it's going to be very, very exciting. And, it's interesting that you mentioned, again, we keep on coming back to the youth. I think kind of some of the talent that is coming out of the Middle East, we touched about that on that in the beginning, is kind of almost the world's biggest kept secret. When we started looking at where we might kind of start looking at talent, and you look at places like Egypt, or you look at places like Jordan, and you look at the stats of how many people with STEM are coming out of university there, that is rivaling India. It's rivaling many places that you just wouldn't have thought of comparing. And I see that the institute itself should be a cornerstone for people to feel that they can collaborate with, that they might have careers in, they can form part of the
and I also don't want to forget that we should also play a part in sort of refreshing senior leadership's knowledge in certain topics, right? So just knowing enough about something can be very, very dangerous, right? Because if you know just a little bit, you may think that you can, your decision making may be influenced and not.
I've made a career out of it.
I know, we're consultants, right? That's what we do. But generally speaking, it is. I think part of what we need to be doing is to look at also the continuous awareness and creating that literacy capability across all levels of an organization and enterprise. And that's an important topic for sure that we need to foster.
No, I agree. I mean, as you know, we're embarking on quite a lot of topics and projects internally, initiatives to allow all of our executives to be able to talk about things like AI and generative AI. It's no longer kind of the
we're not only the geeks
for us.
It's not restricted to the geeks.
Like CEOs want to know about it, and it's everybody has to be a couple of questions deep.
Yeah.
So that's that's really, really valid. I'm just conscious of time. We've got another, I think, five minutes or so before we have to hand over. I didn't want to end our conversation without talking about experience analytics.
This is going to be amazing.
It's going to be amazing, isn't it?
This is going to be amazing, right? So let's talk about it. So we are actually, Experience Analytics is coming to the Middle East. So it's going to run in Riyadh this time. May 18th is the date. We're hoping that we're going to see it's going to be a phenomenal experience for all our clients. Experience Analytics, is all about experiencing what AI is about, right? It's not about talking about it. It's not, telling people about it. It's showing it, right? Yeah. So we want people to actually experience it themselves. We want people to see what innovations are happening. So we are, for example, going to be showcasing some very exciting stuff around generative AI and large language models that my team is, along with some of course, with the AI Institute team, we're creating some really interesting assets and that are specific for the Middle East, that are specific for our client environments that they can benefit from. So it's going to be absolutely amazing. Last time we ran Experience Analytics was in Dubai on February 13th, 2020. If you remember, that was 2 weeks before the world shut down completely. So,
I do remember that. Absolutely.
It was an amazing experience for our clients and for our teams, and people got to see, our clients got to see what it really means to innovate in the space of data and advanced analytics. And we're going to be doing the same thing. Hopefully, nothing is going to disrupt the world this time. But yeah, so and then there are a couple of very interesting surprises,
Yeah.
that we got in the books for Experience Analytics Riyadh this time.
I'm terrible at keeping secrets, and I won't
that's
say
why
anything.
I'm not gonna say too much
I'm
either
coming
about it.
just for a couple of the speakers that you mentioned. I think it's going to be really
It's
fantastic.
going to be really, really interesting.
And it's in Riyadh, right?
It is in Riyadh, and it's we're actually also having quite a few of our clients are going to speak this time. So rather than just Deloitte speaking, right? So we're going to see how real life examples of how our clients are implementing and adopting AI in order to solve their problems, which is I think this is the best way to see it, right? Is to see how others have used it. And our clients have been amazing, agreeing to be on stage with us, talk about their real life experiences. So watch this space. I hope to see as many of our clients there. I'm going to see you there for sure, right?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't miss it, which is really great. It's interesting, because I think the name Experience Analytics, right, almost betrays how long it's been going, right? I think because analytics was the big thing when we first launched it about a decade ago in London, and I remember kind of in the first event waiting, because we'd never done something like that before, waiting for the doors to open and not knowing if anyone would show up, a bit like a party when you're a teenager. And something like 200 clients showed up. And actually one of the biggest satisfactions that we saw there was not the Deloitte client interaction, but the client interaction.
Yeah, for sure.
Making the connections, kind of almost ecosystems of clients being created in there, which I thought was hugely rewarding in that respect.
Yeah, for sure. We're very, very excited about it. And, I think it's going to be an amazing experience for all of us.
Great, fantastic. Well, I really look forward to that.